moaning Lisa, and sang the blues with him in a really lovely moment. This was the first episode of the series to focus on Lisa, and the idea was suggested by producer James L. Brooks, who wanted to do an episode where Lisa was sad but she didn't know why. This revelation being that she can now express herself through song, which she does frequently throughout the show. And even though Homer doesn't seem to get Lisa's sexy shtick, he has had quite the musical career himself, from forming his own barbershop quartet to a grunge metal band called Sargasm. Homer also became a world-famous opera singer and obviously has the musical qualifications to become the manager of famous country singer Larlene. Homer was also nominated for a real-life Emmy for his catchy song Everybody Hates Ned Flanders. Even Marge, whose voice we wouldn't ordinarily associate with musical greatness, uses her gravelly but sincere voice to soothe her family in cute, loving moments.
You are so beautiful to me.
Over on Twitter a while ago, I asked what's your favourite musical moment from The Simpsons to fans across the globe, and I received an overwhelming response. I was surprised just how varied the choices were. It made me realise just how many musical moments were in the show and just what they meant to fellow Simpsons fans. And it seems that one song came up again and again and proved very popular. This was of course the Monorail song. When the town finds Mr. Burns for polluting, they find themselves with a large sum of money to spend. Lucky devils. That's when Ever the Optimist Lani arrives to sell them a monorail system. And how does he convince the town to waste all of their money on a monorail? He sings their song, of course.
What I say? Monorail!
The con man dismisses their concerns with a catchy song, swindling the town out of their money with a smile.
Were you sent here by the devil?
No, good sir, I'm on the level.
And to be fair, that song and that smile would persuade anyone. The show is full of these wonderful musical numbers, from Homer's Play It Cool advice that I have to say I sing to most of my friends before their Tinder dates, to Homer's turkey song.
You came and you found me a turd.
When Apu loses his job at the Quickie Mart, he moves in with the host for the Lost and Found, The Simpsons Family. While there, he sings the Emmy-nominated song about how he doesn't need the convenience store anymore and how he's better off without it. Until it's revealed at the very end that he needed it all along.
He lied to us through song. I hate when people do that.
After Bart accidentally breaks the stone gargoyle at a grand old house, he is sent to work there as punishment, prompted by Homer. But when he gets there, he discovers that it's a saucy burlesque house hosted for those naughty Springfieldians, named Maison Derrière.
That means the back house.
However, when the town finds out about this, they do what they do best, forming an angry mob to threaten to burn it down. But before they can, Homer starts a song about the cultural importance of the house. Soon enough, everyone is joining in, even hires Reverend Lovejoy. The jaunty jingle manages to convert the townsfolk into letting the house stay. The song is so catchy, it even won an Emmy Award for outstanding music and lyrics, and convinced more than Ned Flanders. I know about you, but I don't know what achievement is more impressive. And who can forget the official Stonecutters national anthem? When they swing their overflowing tankards, they reveal their secret society's secret deeds, like leaving Atlantis off the maps, and of course keeping the Martians under wraps. The Simpsons are masters of parody, paying homage to everything from Indiana Jones to 2001: A Space Odyssey. They're also not shy to parodying famous movie songs either. In the Season 9 episode, The Garbage Man Can, Homer becomes Springfield Sanitation Commissioner after making some crazy promises.
The garbage man!
He sings a song to the tune of The Candyman from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, glorifying what garbage men can do, like disposing of dirty magazines and diapers, and all with a smile. Of course, the reality is much less glamorous. The Simpsons are also no stranger to poking fun at the House of Mouse. They have parodied a number of Disney classics throughout the years, like Homer's Under the Sea riff and my personal favourite, See My Vest.
See my vest.
This number is of course a parody of the classic Be Our Guest in Beauty and the Beast. The episode itself centres around Mr. Burns wanting to skin some puppies to make some clothing, based on Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. They're so catchy that I actually prefer these from the originals.
Na na na. Sorry. Gotta get it.
And then there's Sherry Bobbins.
Did you say Mary Poppins?
No, I definitely did not.
The music throughout the episode mirrors the Oscar-winning film, but in a satirical twist. Unlike Mary Poppins, who preaches the importance of cleaning up after yourselves, Sherry Bobbins sings about cutting corners. She's my kind of gal. Instead of helping the family to be better people, they instead break her. The moral of the story: despite the efforts of Sherry Bobbins, The Simpsons will always be perfectly imperfect in every way. But we could not do this video without bringing up one of the greatest musical parodies ever. In the season 7 episode of Fish Called Selma, washed-up actor Troy McClure resurrects his failed career by marrying Sally. This is in order to clean up his fishy image. The result being that the actor with a food fetish is trying to star in a Broadway musical. Stop the Planet of the Apes, I want to get off. In a musical retelling of the 1968 film, you have everything, even breakdancing apes and bombastic 80s music. It's absolute genius, from playing the piano for the first time to the call back up to the original film.
Get your paws off me, you dirty ape!
One of the producers, Josh Bonstein, said, on a personal note, it's one of my favourite things ever, because it's The Simpsons firing on all pistons. This musical is everything the show should be and wants to be, and that's why I think it's so great. Screw Wicked, this is the musical I want to see. In addition to movie star cameos, dozens of famous musicians also lend their talents to the show. Sting, Tom Jones, Aerosmith, Judas Priest, Green Day, Bette Midler and Lady Gaga are just a few who have sung on the show. Michael Jackson also voiced a part in the show, but all the musical parts like Lisa It's Your Birthday were actually sung by musician Kip Lemon. The show have also released several albums throughout the years, but the biggest was The Simpsons Sing the Blues, which was released in 1990 and featured original recorded music not featured in the series. The Simpsons was the biggest thing in the world at that point, so it's no surprise that the album quickly went double platinum. A big part of the album's success was most likely due to the single Do the Bartman. It's the most 90s thing, and it's still annoyingly catchy. I'm not sure if The Simpsons would have lasted the test of time without these musical moments. The Simpsons have celebrated and combined all types of music and introduced viewers to genres that they would not ordinarily be exposed to, as well as shaping the characters beyond spoken dialogue. And without it, we wouldn't have learnt about Apu's deep emotional attachment to the Quickie Mart, how easily the town can be swayed by charismatic strangers, and their secret saucy underbelly. But I want to hear from you. What's your favourite Simpsons musical moment? Please let me know in the comments below. Finally, I like to end this video by saying a huge thank you to my Flying Hellfish unit. We have Timothy, who else but Zane, Liam, Tommy, Steve, Charlie, Sean, Justin, Andre, Stefan, Jake, David, Nicholas, Vincent, Robert, Ashley, Kevin, Rob, Devin, Gadrak, Bailey, Stephen, Edward, Anthony, Nicola, Nerdcentric, Jeffrey and Felix.
This is Lionel Hutz, aka Miguel Sanchez, aka Dr. Nguyen Van Falk. He is Springfield's most accomplished and successful lawyer. At least that's what he would tell you. In reality, Mr. Hutz achieves the rare combination of being both unethical and incompetent. He stretches all the legal conventions in trying to win, but usually ends up losing anyway. Probably because he has no idea what he's doing, or forgets to wear pants, or ran over the judge's son. Really, you could pick any of these explanations. In addition to his legal practice, Lionel Hutz offers his services as a babysitter or realtor, which is great because his clients will probably need a lawyer after he's done. But at the very least, they will be entertained with many memorable moments. He is very good at providing those. This is the history of Lionel Hutz. Alright, Lionel Hutz will be a fun character to look at, especially right after looking at Troy McClure. Both of Phil Hartman's characters definitely share some qualities in their characterization over the years. They both are certainly associated with Dr. Nick. But in terms of actual function, they are polar opposites. It took Troy McClure 7 years to meet the Simpsons. Lionel Hutz is almost always interacting with them. He really gets entrenched in the plot. So let's go back and look at how he was used in these different stories, and how they managed to keep him so fresh and so quotable for so many seasons. Lionel Hutz first appeared in Season 2's nonsensically titled episode, Bart Gets Hit by a Car. He chases after Bart's ambulance and represents them in their lawsuit against Mr. Burns. He originally started out as simply a caricature of the shady, crooked, personal injury lawyer. We all know this kind of stereotype by now. The sort of lawyer who would exaggerate the injuries and overestimate the financial damages. Lisa literally asks him if he's a shyster in the episode. Season 2 did not portray Hutz as being particularly incompetent. Back then it was more about tacky promotional products and general dodgy behavior. Remember, it wasn't his stupidity that lost this case, it was Marge's honesty. We get a much more vanilla and subdued portrayal in Old Money, when he's the executor of B. Simmons' will. He makes a joke about a haunted house, but otherwise does his job with his usual enthusiasm. Season 3 expanded upon this by giving us tiny little glimpses that maybe this guy doesn't know what he's doing. But just glimpses for now. For example, in Bart the Murderer, he's not exactly messing up the legal terms or asking ridiculously dumb questions, he just wants to know if he still gets paid. In Flaming Moe's, he looks sort of impressed that his books behind him are full of useful legal tidbits. The later Hutz would never bother with books, whereas this version still at least tries to be helpful. But oh boy, Season 4. Here's where everything changes with this character, where I think he gets fully formed. Here's where they add that extra layer of silliness to Lionel Hutz. It's not just about observational jokes about their life. We get something like the seafood buffet lesson, where he gets attached to an inherently silly argument. He'll sue the Neverending Story for false advertising, for example. In addition, the way he practices law and his general ineffectiveness becomes even more absurd. This is really his bread and butter as a character, what we all remember him for. He'll scream, run out of the room, and leave behind shredded newspapers. He'll try to steal Aunt Gladys's money with a terrible audio dubbing. He'll start working a case from within a jail cell. I guess I forgot to mention that his shadiness also gets ramped up around this time. Season 4 contains, in my opinion, Lionel Hutz's greatest performance ever, in Marge in Chains. He just absolutely kills it in this episode. It's like the only reason they made this story was to fill Act 2 full of amazing Hutz material. The rest, give me more of this guy. We've got the smoking monkey, Hutz mentioning he ran over Judge Snyder's son repeatedly. We've got the brownest of brown liquors, we've got David Crosby, we have the necktie joke, the world without lawyers, him showing up without pants, the bad court thing, the law-talking guy, trying to change the verdict, misspelling the verdict. Yes, I realize I am literally just listing jokes at this point, something I try not to do, but when researching this project, I just couldn't get over how many classic Hutz lines this thing is filled with. You should rewatch it, this part is so great. Honestly, if I had to pinpoint Lionel Hutz's quote-unquote heyday, it would be Seasons 4 and 5, spanning 2 different showrunner regimes. Season 4 contained 6 different roles for Lionel Hutz, and then Season 5 continued that trend with 6 more. That's about 25% of the episodes over 2 years. Pretty good for a guest star and 1 character. Season 5 tended to be more of the same regarding his lawyer jokes. They mostly focused on putting him in new crazy situations, like being in a Treehouse of Horror segment. Or when doing something more traditional, becoming more self-aware and consciously questioning why they keep hiring him. This was a good decision in terms of their timing. We had reached the point where we could start lampshading this pattern. We actually don't know a lot about Lionel Hutz's life outside his profession. We saw him in a play in Season 4, but that's about it. Season 5 treated us to a couple peeks at who this guy really is. We hear about how he's a real user of women. We also get to see him become a babysitter for the Simpson family. This B-plot in particular has got to be the most desperate Lionel Hutz has ever been portrayed, changing his name to Miguel Sanchez and burning all his belongings. Honestly, it's a really nice change of pace for this guy. It's fun seeing him in a new setting, and is a nice opportunity to escalate some of his earlier jokes about his vices. By now, I totally buy that this guy would be that desperate for $8. After this point, however, Lionel Hutz's appearances tended to be more brief and stereotypical. Like in Sideshow Bob Roberts, he barely even tries and immediately asks the kids for help. We don't see much of his lawsuit or the Crustios and around Springfield. We just get a short and sweet joke about his ridiculous legal fees. In the Springfield connection, we go straight to another joke about him burning stuff. I like all these jokes still, but it's clear they didn't want to overdo it with him, and devote a lot of time to recycling a concept. I think that's fair. They pushed him pretty hard for 2 whole seasons. There's an interesting phenomenon with the Merkin years we just discussed, and the Oakley and Weinstein era, seasons 7 and 8. Merkin barely used Troy McClure at all, and instead highlighted Lionel Hutz. Whereas Oakley and Weinstein gave Troy a spotlight episode and specials, but then Hutz could barely get any lines. He shows up briefly in Radioactive Man, as Milhouse's drug dealer keeper awayer, and appears as a cameo in 22 short films about Springfield. And he doesn't have any speaking roles in Season 8. None. He appears in backgrounds, but otherwise he gets completely shut out. He does, however, have Season 7's The Day the Violence Died, so maybe it's all okay. Actually, this one kind of feels like a sequel to Marge and Chains, really showing off Lionel Hutz in Act 2. It's not as flawless as the earlier example, but it does give us stuff like his list of surprise witnesses, and his argument that hearsay and conjecture are kinds of evidence. Maybe after Season 5 his usage did fall off considerably, but I'm glad this era of the show at least gave him one time to shine. Basically the same thing could be said for Season 9. Yeah, he's in Lisa the Skeptic, but it's clear that Realty Bites was designed to be our big dose of Hutz for the year. Now I'm going to be upfront right here. I'm not a fan of Lionel Hutz in this specific role. It's not bad by any means, it's just one of his less fun appearances, in my opinion. Which is kind of a shame, because it's his last speaking role in the entire series. Now to their credit, the idea of Hutz being a realtor is a cool idea. He has that slickness, that deceptiveness, where you could imagine him being a shifty realtor type. I really like this scene of him describing crappy homes to Marge. I'm totally on board conceptually.
We've lost the lead!
It's just his aggressiveness feels a little weird. The way they have him constantly beat up on poor Gil and threatens to fire Marge. We hadn't seen something like this since his outburst back in Bart Gets Hit by a Car. I think what always worked about Lionel Hutz as a character is his constant cheerfulness and enthusiasm, as he fails miserably or cheats people out of their money. That juxtaposition was always the key. I'm not going to say I hate the edge to this particular role, it's just not quite as fun as his other stuff. Maybe this is all Gil's fault for being such a pushover. A lot of people cite The Principal and the Pauper as the end of the classic era of The Simpsons. But I wonder if there's a case for Realty Bites. Not only is Lionel Hutz's last speaking role, but it does kind of feel like he's passing the torch to new characters right here. Gil went on to replace Hutz in many legal cases, became the sort of stand-in for a desperate random working type. Obviously a very different kind of character, but used for similar purposes. And then there's Cookie Kwan, who also makes her first appearance right here. I like Cookie Kwan, I think she's a little underappreciated, to be honest, but I always think of her as one of those post-classic folks, you know? We need a support group for those quote-unquote new guys who have actually been on the show for over 20 years. Much like with Troy McClure, I think the writers made the right call in retiring Lionel Hutz after Phil Hartman's death. This is another case where it just wouldn't have been the same with a sound-alike or another voice actor. It's interesting looking at Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz back-to-back, because they both do highlight how much enthusiasm and energy Phil Hartman brought to his characters. I don't care if Lionel Hutz is sometimes a terrible and conniving person, he's so charming and fun. I just want to see more of him. Marge keeps wondering why they keep hiring him. I would say it's because they can't resist his charm. Also because the Simpsons are constantly broke. That's a good reason too. Probably the biggest compliment you could give to Lionel Hutz as a character was that his heyday was right smack in the middle of those classic years. It really is a shame that his usage fell off so much in the later seasons, that they sort of burned him out. But to be an integral part of seasons 4 and 5, well, that's a good place to be. Lionel Hutz was a big contributor to why those seasons turned out as good as they were. An otherwise mediocre episode gets propped up considerably by the services of Mr. Lionel Hutz. He's like a performing, enhancing character for any story. Before we go, one last little note about Phil Hartman's characters. As a rule, the writers tended to avoid using both Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure in the same episode. It makes sense. You could argue these similar voices might become a distraction. There's definitely a difference in intonation with the deliveries, but you probably wouldn't want these two characters talking to each other. However, there are 7 episodes that feature both of them in speaking roles. We'll call them the Phil Hartman 7. They are Bart the Murderer, A Streetcar Named Marge, Marge Gets a Job, Selma's Choice, Duckless, Marge in Chains, and Marge on the Lam. Weird. A bunch of them are Marge episodes. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Lionel Hutz jokes are. There are so many to choose from, so many great lines. Let's see if you can come up with one favorite, one quote to rule them all. Personally, I'm going with the brownest of brown liquids. Also, keep those votes coming for the next Simpsons History's candidate. I'll keep all the suggestions in the last video in mind, since we ended up doing 2 back-to-back. I've been hitting up the guest stars a lot lately, so maybe we should save Sajida for later and feature one of the main voice cast. Maybe old Gil will finally get his moment in the sun. He's been sending me messages for months asking for one of these. I'll eventually call him back. As always, thanks for watching.
UAV online.
This is Helen Lovejoy. She is the self-described, gossipy wife of the minister, Timothy Lovejoy. When she is not casting judgment on others or being terrible in general to Marge, she is expressing outrage over the state of Springfield. In particular, she cares deeply about the children. Helen is a devout Christian and is generally supportive of her husband's work. Their marriage has, however, lost its sizzle over time, and Helen has tried various surprising and freaky things to spice things up. But you didn't hear that from me. This is the history of Helen Lovejoy. Helen Lovejoy is the worst. Nobody likes her. She is one of the most consistently antagonistic characters on the show, written in a way where you're supposed to be supremely annoyed by her antics. But I'd imagine there are some fans of Helen out there as a character, just because she's so over-the-top judgmental and passive-aggressive towards people. And I suppose you gotta have someone on the show ready to spill the tea at a moment's notice. In addition, she's kind of a mysterious character. She's good at spreading rumors, but doesn't really talk about herself that much. So what is going on with Helen Lovejoy? Does she really have her life together? Let's take a look. Helen's very first speaking role was in Season 1's Life on the Fast Lane, where she catches Marge having brunch with Jacques. It's a pretty brief appearance, but gets straight to the point on her shtick. She's gossipy, she's the minister's wife, she makes Marge uncomfortable, we wish someone would run her over. Check. Season 2 brought in a couple major new components for her character. First, her responsibility in handing over the phone to her husband when Ned Flanders calls. This is a hilariously consistent aspect to these jokes. Helen always seems to set up the conversation with a very knowingly announcement. Secondly, Season 2 introduces her activism and outrage over the state of the world. She readily joins SNA with Maud Flanders and leads the charge against Michelangelo's David. She describes male genitalia as practical but evil, establishing her general prudishness and shock toward anything that could be considered sexual in nature. This obviously makes a ton of sense why they chose Helen Lovejoy for this role. There are definitely Christians who preach abstinence only and have similar reactions to these situations. Helen was somewhat of a slow starter on the series, being used very sparingly in the first 6 seasons. She'd mostly pop up to express her judgment on whatever the plot is, and then go away. She'll complain about the Simpsons marketing, theorize that Flanders is jealous of Homer, declare the defendant obviously guilty, comment that their elephant is bad-tempered. She plays a slightly larger role in Marge in Chains in Season 4, testifying in the shoplifting trial and suggesting that Marge drinks. This is the closest to an episodic character arc Helen actually gets. In the end, she actually expresses regret. Regret? From Helen Lovejoy? Inconceivable. Her other prominent role is in Bart's girlfriend. She isn't paired up with Bart for many scenes together in the series, but they are surprisingly good comedic foils. This appearance sort of has it all. Her leading questions, her dismissiveness, her shrieking disgust. Make it stop! Make it stop! Now, the early seasons were nice and all, but I would argue that Helen Lovejoy's best era on the show were the Opie and Weinstein years, seasons 7 and 8. There is one pretty iconic reason why. Season 7 brought us Much Ado About Nothing, which spawned the immortal line, "Will somebody please think of the children?" Say what you want about Helen Lovejoy's lack of relevance on The Simpsons, but that's a pretty huge contribution to pop culture, even if she didn't technically invent the tactic. Not many Simpsons characters have their own law named after them. She says a variation on the phrase 3 separate times in the episode, escalating the shrillness in each instance. Interestingly, they didn't really run with this as a long-running catchphrase for her. She says it again in the Prohibition episode, and in Season 9, Moe steals her line. But other than that, they mostly leave it alone. Season 8 was really good to Helen too, probably her most prolific year. It gave her the maison derrière to protest against, a chance to accuse Lisa of being on drugs, and the rumor that Skinner and Krabappel were doing it. Season 8 provided a lot of scandal for her to comment on. In addition, they really ramped up the antagonistic relationship between she and Marge. She delivers a delightfully catty greeting to Marge in the Chili Pepper episode, absolutely savoring every moment of judgment. Even Reverend Lovejoy finds it too indulgent, telling her to call off the dog. We also have the pretzel episode, where Helen leads the charge in kicking Marge out against the rocks. You could argue that all the ladies are being tired of her, but Helen seems to be the leader of the group. She is the one who immediately declares Marge as popular as Rugburn and calls a vote to kick her out. We don't really get to see Marge have many female friends and acquaintances in the early years. It was just Ruth Powers and that country club. This episode sort of reinforces Marge and Helen's relationship as frenemies, a dynamic we will see a ton in the later seasons. I think my favorite character moment for Helen Lovejoy is in the Listen Lady episode, where Reverend Lovejoy gets super depressed and she reluctantly calls Marge to ask for advice to help him. Helen's an extremely proud person, and we just talked about how judgmental she is toward Marge. The fact that she's able to swallow her pride, push through the awkwardness, and ask for Marge for help for her husband, well, that's a really nice moment. Spoiler warning, this video isn't going to be super complimentary of her in general, but you gotta give her credit right here. So it's the end of Season 8, and Helen Lovejoy is flying high. What next? Well, she practically falls off the face of the earth, a veritable Helen Lovejoy dark age until Season 14 or 15. She has an extremely strange history on the show, due to the situation with her voice actor. Around Season 10, Maggie Roswell has a pay dispute with Fox over her travel expenses, and Fox, ever the cheapskates, opts to let her go. Maggie Roswell also voices characters like Miss Hoover, Luann Van Houten, and Maude Flanders. This ultimately led to the writers killing off Maude in Season 11. They brought in a different voice actor for Maude and Helen Lovejoy on a few occasions, but she couldn't replicate the original performance. The Helen impression is particularly bad. It's like way too deep for her character. Although to be fair, Helen's voice does deepen noticeably over the years. But this one in Tennis the Menace was just really weird to listen to. Eventually, Roswell was able to reach an agreement to return to the show. But at that point, they had already killed off Maude Flanders. So what do? As a result, Helen Lovejoy had a sort of renaissance in the later years of the show. She never became like a major secondary character or anything, but from around Season 18 and on, the show suddenly seemed more interested in the Lovejoys. They started popping up in more episodes again as a couple. When something like Moe Letter Blues is being produced, Helen Lovejoy is selected as one of the candidates Moe might run away with. Turns out in that example, their marriage wasn't on the rocks, at least not yet, and she was planning a trip instead. The most controversial Helen Lovejoy moment happened in Season 20's Wedding for Disaster. The parson comes by to tell Reverend Lovejoy about a certification issue, and he says he remembers when Helen was Helen Schwartzbaum. He even remembers when she was Harold Schwartzbaum. There's a lot to unpack here. The last name Schwartzbaum is intended to imply Helen may have come from a Jewish background. The Harold part of it is just really confusing, to be honest. Tim didn't know about this, and they did have a daughter together, is the implication that Helen is a trans woman? Is Jessica adopted? Or did she identify as male at some point in her life? Maybe Helen is gender fluid. It probably wasn't when she was 10 years old, since she was with Marge at Camp Landaman. Of course, it might just be that the parson was just messing with Reverend Lovejoy. Who knows? Based on his shocked reaction, this line is seemingly meant to make fun of religious people, who are so very terrified about gender. The writers never really followed up on this in later episodes, so it's treated more as an unspoken